Rescuers found the tiniest puppy they had ever seen, barely alive, barely breathing. They thought it wouldn't survive a single night. But when the vet examined her closely, his hands trembled and tears filled his eyes. What he discovered? Inside this fragile little life would leave everyone in the room speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The night was quiet, the kind of silence where even the smallest sound felt loud. A passerby hurried along the narrow alley when a faint, broken whimper stopped him in his tracks. At first, he thought it was just the wind. But then it came again, weak, desperate, unmistakably alive. Curiosity pulled him closer. His eyes scanned the shadows until they landed on a damp cardboard box shoved against the wall. The sound grew sharper now, trembling cries leaking through the fragile walls of the box. His heartbeat quickened as he crouched down, hands hesitant, unsure what he might find inside. When he lifted the flap, his breath caught. Curled up inside was the smallest puppy he had ever seen. Her tiny body shook with every breath, eyes barely open, formatted and damp. For a moment, he simply stared, unable to believe something so fragile could still be alive. The passerby rushed through the night, cradling the trembling bundle in his hands. Every few steps he glanced down, terrified the little heartbeat might stop. The shelter's neon sign flickered in the distance, and he pushed his pace, whispering, "Hold on, little one. Just hold on." Inside, the shelter was buzzing with noise, barks, whines, and clattering cages. When the man burst through the doors, volunteers froze at the sight of the soaked cardboard box. Gently, he set it down on the counter, his voice shaking as he explained what he had found in the alley. Gasps rippled through the staff. They leaned in, stunned by the puppy's size, whispering to one another in disbelief. "She's too small," one muttered. "She won't make it." But another volunteer quickly reached for the phone, dialing the emergency vet. Hope and fear mingled in the air as everyone's eyes fixed on the fragile life before them. Minutes later, the shelter doors swung open as the vet hurried in, carrying his worn leather bag. His expression was steady, but his eyes revealed concern. Volunteers stepped aside, their voices hushed, as he approached the counter where the tiny puppy lay shivering under a towel. Carefully, he lifted her into his hands. She was weightless, no heavier than a bird, her frail body barely filling his palm. He pressed his stethoscope gently against her chest, pausing as the faint, irregular rhythm filled his ears. The room grew tense, every whisper fading into silence. The vet frowned, his brows knitting as he examined her trembling limbs and rapid breaths. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, he exhaled and looked up at the anxious faces around him. "This isn't just weakness," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of worry. "There's something else going on here." The vet adjusted his glasses, leaning closer as he ran careful fingers along the puppy's fragile frame. Each touch revealed bones far too sharp beneath the thin layer of fur. Her breathing hitched, shallow and uneven, making his chest tighten. With unease, something deeper than malnourishment was at play. He reached for a small light, tilting her head gently to inspect her eyes and gums. The color drained from his face as he noticed the faint bluish tint, a silent signal of an underlying condition. His throat tightened as he glanced back at the waiting volunteers, their faces pale with anticipation. Finally, his voice cracked through the silence. "She isn't just the run of the litter," he whispered. "She was born with a rare defect. Without immediate intervention, she won't survive the night." The words hung in the air like a verdict, and the room erupted in stunned disbelief. The shelter staff exchanged uneasy glances, their whispers trembling with fear and doubt. One volunteer bit her lip, her voice breaking as she said, Maybe it's kinder to let her go." The words stung the air, heavy and cold, leaving everyone silent for a moment too long. The vet's jaw tightened as he cradled the tiny puppy closer. Her faint whimper vibrated against his hand, fragile yet stubborn, refusing to fade. He looked into her half-closed eyes and saw something no one else dared to see. A spark, a silent plea not to give up just yet. Shaking his head, his voice rose with quiet conviction. "No, she deserves a chance. As long as she's fighting, so will we." Determination filled the room, pushing away the shadows of doubt. The shelter staff leaned in, hearts torn but moved. The decision was made. The battle for her life would begin. The shelter transformed into an emergency ward that night. The tiny puppy was placed on a soft blanket, wires gently attached to monitor her fragile heartbeat. The vet prepared a syringe with trembling hands, carefully measuring a dose so small it barely filled the tip of the needle. Every second mattered. Volunteers gathered in a circle, their eyes locked on the fragile life before them. Some clasped their hands in silent prayer. Others whispered encouragements as if their voices could carry strength into the puppy's body. The air was thick with tension, every beep of the monitor echoing like a drumbeat of hope. Hours passed, in agonizing slowness. The vet never left her side, his eyes red with fatigue, yet fierce with determination. He adjusted oxygen flow, massaged her chest when her breaths faltered, and murmured, "Stay with us, little one." His voice cracked, but his hands never wavered. Just before dawn, the faint rhythm on the monitor steadied. The puppy's tiny chest rose with slightly stronger breaths. Relief rippled through the room. The vet slumped back in his chair, tears welling as he whispered, "She's still fighting." For the first time, hope outshone fear. The first rays of dawn painted the shelter windows in pale gold, but inside, exhaustion weighed heavy. The vet rubbed his weary eyes, unwilling to step away even for a moment. The puppy's breaths were fragile but steady, a rhythm that felt like a miracle in itself. Yet he knew the fight wasn't over. Suddenly, the faintest sound broke the silence, a soft whimper, higher and stronger than before. The volunteers gasped, leaning closer. The tiny creature, once limp and motionless, shifted her head slightly, her weak paws twitching as if she were reaching out to the world again. It was a sign of life, a declaration of survival. The vet pressed his stethoscope to her chest, and his eyes glistened with tears. "Her heart, it's stronger," he whispered, his voice breaking. Relief rippled through the room, and some volunteers wiped at their eyes, unable to contain their joy. Overwhelmed, the vet lowered his head, tears spilling freely. "You've done it, little fighter," he murmured, brushing a gentle hand across her tiny head. "You chose life." For the first time since she had arrived, the room filled not with dread, but with unshakable hope. Against all odds, the smallest puppy had begun her miracle. Days turned into weeks, and the once fragile puppy slowly transformed. Her breaths grew steadier, her movements stronger. Each morning, she greeted the shelter staff with a faint but determined wag of her tiny tail, a silent thank you for the second chance she had been given. The volunteers named her Hope, a name that seemed to fit perfectly. She became the heart of the shelter, her story spreading among staff and visitors. People who once entered with heavy hearts found themselves smiling when they saw her tiny frame stumbling across the floor with newfound courage. The vet, who had fought hardest for her survival, visited daily, always kneeling to stroke her head. "You're proof that miracles exist," he whispered each time. Hope's resilience wasn't just healing her own body, it was healing the people around her too, reminding them all why they had chosen to fight for the helpless. One sunny afternoon, a gentle family walked into the shelter and instantly fell in love with Hope. The children knelt, giggling as the tiny puppy stumbled into their arms, her tail wagging furiously despite her size. It was clear she had found her forever home. Weeks later, the vet received a letter along with a photo of Hope nestled happily in her new family's embrace. The note was simple yet powerful. "You didn't just save her life, you gave her a future." Tears filled his eyes as he read the words. Hope had truly lived up to her name.